More than that, just to create a new environment for jiu-jitsu to evolve in the competitive format that we have today. What also happened there was it absorbed aspects of the Brazilian surf culture and beach culture in general. Now, it's easy for us to take these things for granted. Like we assume that they were always part of jiu-jitsu, but it always wasn't always like that. For most of jiu-jitsu's history in the 20th century in the Gracie Academy, it was something very formal. It was like mostly businessmen and politicians and the wealthier classes. It was not, you didn't walk in flip-flops, hugging your instructor, showing up 5 minutes late, eating acai after practice. Now, we take these things, yeah, that's what jiu-jitsu is, but these things were not part of the original jiu-jitsu program in Brazil. It was after Carlson and that beach culture made its way because that's the kind of guy he was. He was the guy that was go out with his students. He was like very unorganized, very welcoming, very warming. He was a different kind of individual in that regard, like a big, big heart. He always had to pay for everyone. He was a very generous person. From all accounts, like he just never really cared about money. Most of his students didn't pay. We have one of his oldest black belts says, listen, man, I'd be surprised if like more than 10% of people in that gym paid. The vast majority of his students didn't even pay because he never charged them. He never cared about it. To him, it was all about the evolution of jiu-jitsu. So for all these reasons, I think Carlson had a very underappreciated role in the history of jiu-jitsu, not just as a fighter. There's no controversy here. He was the most successful fighter in the history of the family. Now, if you talk about competitive jiu-jitsu, of course, you'd have guys like Roger and Hoyler in there. But remember, in Carlson's day, the competition circuit was barely getting off the ground. He had no competition. But in terms of MMA/Vale Tudo, it was without a doubt he was the greatest fighter in the family. Like people put Hickson on a pedestal, and Hickson was very important. Like don't get me wrong, he's played his role, but you could never begin to compare his record with Carlson's. Like not even close. Like you have to be on a different planet to be able to compare the records in terms of who he fought, who Carlson fought, and who Hickson fought, for example. Like there are leagues of distance in terms of credibility here of the opponents. And not only that, but as a coach too, you have to remember as a coach, Carlson went pretty much. I mean, his team was undefeated. It was a dominant team in Brazil for 3 decades. Like it wasn't like, oh, it was a close day. Like no, 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 no. His guys won every single division. Now, why did he win every single division? The answer is obvious. Like they train competitively. How we train, how I train, how you train. Right? It's just that at the time, these answers weren't obvious. People didn't think it was that important to train competitively. And as a result, Carlson dominated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu scene. He later has an opponent who is still also his brother. It was a brotherly rivalry. I call it. I have a chapter about that in the book. And him and Hollis Gracie. Brazilians say Hollis. Americans say Rolls. I've been corrected by Brazilians so many times in the last year. I'm going to say Hollis, okay?